This weekend, we are experiencing the triad feast of All Hallows Eve, All Saints, and All Souls Day. All Hallows Eve, of course, the name has been changed into Halloween, and more modern times are connecting it with Samhain and some of the pagan cultures in the Celtic lands. But the two are very, very separate. They just happen to coincidentally be on the same day, and coincidentally happen to be about some of the same topics, namely respecting those who've gone before us and recognizing our place in the great continuum of of spirituality, of humanity, of people of faith. Um, it's important kind of to situate ourselves. If you can see this well enough. Oops, there goes the arrows. We are in the liturgical year right here, about 4 weeks before the beginning of Advent. And the reason that is significant when it comes to All Saints is because when this feast was established, Advent wasn't just 4 weeks, it actually began earlier. So, All Saints, All Souls, that was the last feast day, the last celebration on November 1st before Advent started on November 11th. And this goes back to the 5th and 6th centuries. So, we've since changed Advent to its 4 week position rather than the 7 week that it had been previously. But All Saints, All Souls gives us an opportunity to look at the people we've loved who've gone before us, but also the people who the church has raised up as people of great significance. The whole idea of All Souls actually goes back to about the 6th, 7th century, where the Pope at the time was aware that the liturgical calendar was just chock a block full of people that were honored. The the beginning of the celebration of saints began in the 3rd century. It was just before Christianity was made legal in 313. People started at that point in time to lift up saints and honor them and saw them as really amazing people and examples of faith life well lived. And it got to the point where people in local churches were constantly adding to the saint calendar. So there'd be a whole lot of people in the local community, grandmothers, grandfathers, great aunts, great uncles, who were really impressive, powerful people who would be given the title saint and put on the calendar to celebrate. And these would be very local. And you'd sometimes get 10, 20 people on one day. And the reason that was difficult is because every time there was a feast day, the people would come to the church to have special masses said rather. So if you have 20 people on a calendar for one day and you have a mass said for every single one of them, that adds up. The priest never leaves. It is very arduous, it's very cumbersome. And the idea that if you don't do this, you're in the wrong, becomes a task, it becomes a burden. It's no longer the celebration that it used to be. So in 700s, I believe it was, the Pope brought all of these various places together, and he had a huge ceremony in Rome where he named a former Greek temple, he named it into the Church of St. Mary and all the martyrs. And that was the first time all of these various saints were brought together into one group. Now, the big ones were highlighted. All the apostles are still highlighted. Mary's highlighted. Mary Nazareth is highlighted. Mary Magdalene's highlighted. St. Paul is highlighted. All of these are still there, but the more localized ones, the ones without the huge following, were brought together in All Saints. And All Souls was the day that came about in the 1000s, 1100s. That was the day when people realized that there was a connection to those who might not have reached the level of saint, but they were still worthy of being remembered. Parents, grandparents, neighbors, aunts and uncles, distant relatives, people who were generally good people who At the time, they believed were kind of hanging out in purgatory before they moved on to heaven. So the way to do an All Souls ceremony was kind of to add to their movement into heaven from a resting place. And this is a time when purgatory was not this dark, narrow evil thing. This was just a resting place, almost like the Egyptian place of the dead. Not well developed, not theologically highlighted by a lot of people, but there's a lot of earthy, pagan, normal traditions around that said that people kind of stayed around until they went on to the next plane. So all of these traditions kind of integrated themselves into Christianity wherever they were. And we get then the triad, All Hallows Eve became a night of vigil, much like the night before Easter and Christmas Eve became vigil for the celebration of the night day. And that's when we get the three traditions, the three ceremonies. And in Christian tradition, we always look at the Beatitudes when we're looking at saints, because saints are considered better people. Whether that's factual or not is almost immaterial. They become the stuff of legends, and we want to look to them. And many people throughout the centuries have been taught that the saints can be a pathway to more enlightenment, deeper faith, more understanding of Christ. And that's kind of where we start today, at a place where all of these people have gone before us. All of them have had something to contribute to the development of Christianity, maybe small things in local communities, maybe huge things like what's going on in the rest of the developing world. But they taught us a little bit more about what it means to be followers of Christ. And Christ spent time teaching people about how to be saints. In fact, in the early church, everybody was considered a saint. It was just, you'd call people a saint the same way you'd call them brother or sister. It was just accepted that that's who we were. Everybody had that special part of God in us that we brought to each other and to worship. And the Beatitudes kind of brings us back to what those little bits were. Blessed are you. Blessed are you if you're poor in spirit. Blessed are you who struggle. Blessed are you who are really having challenges, economic challenges, mental challenges, health challenges, you name it. If you are struggling, there's a special place in the community of God for you. And it almost gets away from real people, how we feel when we look. If we use the word blessed and look at all those who are downtrodden and lost, those of us who've been comfortable for a while don't necessarily see ourselves in there. So I want to do a different thing today. I want to talk about a different translation of the word blessed. I want to use the word honored, which is completely legit as a translation. Honored are you when people talk about you and insult you and put you down because they want to have power. Honored are you when you have physical or mental or emotional or learning challenges because you know what it's like to be left behind. Honored are you who struggle to make ends meet, who struggle with payments, who struggle financially when there's so much largesse around. You have that raw edge that brings you closer to the community of heaven. These are what the Beatitudes were about. They were not about separating someone and treating them like they were special human beings with special grace. And that's kind of what the saints devolved into. People who really didn't have faults. So you would emulate them. But the thing is, the most saint stories are really thin, really superficial. They don't talk about the dark side. They don't talk about when people lost their temper or yelled something they shouldn't have or chucked a book at someone who was arguing with them. We don't hear those stories, the real human sides of stories. But Jesus kind of took that one step further, and he did want the human side of stories. Honored are you when you struggle, because all Christians struggle, all people struggle. Honored are you when life does not seem fair, because you know what? It's not. There's absolutely no reason why people who work hard are poor and people who do absolutely nothing have inherited huge amounts of money. That's not fair. That's not just. Honored are you that you recognize that and still keep going in a system that is designed to keep you out and keep you down. Honored are you in all of your struggles, in your health, in your physical disabilities, when you still try to make things go forward for yourself. Honored are all of us to know that Christ chose us. We are all saints. We are all the souls. And separating people out kind of takes away from the continuity that we're part of. We are just as much part of the Church of Hildegard and the Church of Augustine as we are the church of our children and grandchildren. And by taking people out of that and putting them on pedestals, we fail to recognize that we are a church where these saints, these people we honor, struggle too. That they wanted to do something different. They wanted to be better. That Jesus taught them in their difficulties that there was something more that they could work from. The message is consistent. One of the things that we get from Matthew and through all the Gospels is this real heavy sense of what is modernity calls social gospel. This sense that those who have a whole lot might be protected in this world where a whole lot is valued, but it's not what's going to make the world for those who don't have much and who live on the raw edge of desperation. Because those folks already understand what it means to give yourself and to be vulnerable to society, to be vulnerable to the way Jesus wants us to live. It's not that if life is good and you're a special person, you get a straight highway to heaven. That's not how this works. It's honored are you if you have struggled, whether it's an internal struggle or a real physical struggle that others can recognize. Honored are you because you are closer to the kingdom of heaven. You get why we need to be doing this. You see the injustice that we need to respond to. You are not so comfortable and isolated and secure that you are not able to see past your luxury to those who need you. Honored are you because you're part of the long train of saints and souls who have brought us to this place 2,000 years later to be able to talk about Jesus, to be able to share what fantastic news it is that Christ brought us, that all people matter. Blessed are you when you are vulnerable, when you are insulted, when you are on the underside of society, because you are the ones that can tap into a broken God who was there for all of us. And some of us can't quite feel that yet because our luxury stands in the way. Blessed are you who are poor in spirit, because you are closer to the kingdom of heaven than anybody that society decides is a success. This whole conversation about saints and souls is an opportunity for us to just sit back for a while, look at the history of these people, look at the stories that we've been told, remind ourselves how these folks listened to the same gospel that we listen to, prayed the same prayers a lot of times that we pray, and we're able to come closer to God. And it's an opportunity for us to look a little more deeper in ourselves and to see who we need to look to, who can inspire us for a faith life in the future. The ideal part of this, being at the end of our Christian year, is that as we pivot at this point in time to look towards Advent and our new year, we can start to make new promises to ourselves and to our faith journey, and have an opportunity to say, you know what, this year I'm going to do something different. I'm going to be a little bit more like the saints I read or the souls I've heard about. Blessed are we when we can constantly reinvent ourselves as people of God, where we open ourselves and make ourselves vulnerable to the message. Honored are we to be followers of Christ.